TGIF, everybody. How's it going? Awesome. Cool. Cranked up.
Hello.
Ready to go? All right. Let's do this. Cool. So, Lauren, what's up?
How's it going, Joe? How's it going, Matt? You can see my hotel room behind you. I'm in Austin, Texas. Been at Data Council this week, shaking hands, kissing babies, doing the usual stuff. Yeah, it's been good.
Oh,
Met a lot of, yeah, go ahead.
how was Data Council?
It was good overall. A lot of people, like, the common consensus among everybody is like, hey, I've seen you on Slack. Hey, we exchanged 30 emails back and forth, haven't met you before. And everyone was meeting everyone in person, which is really awesome because, the last 2 years, everyone's been stuck at home. So it was really great for everyone to, meet people that they know from a profile picture, that they know from emails and Zoom calls, to actually, sit down, shake hands, drink a beer, whatever. So it was great.
That's awesome.
It's a weird sensation, right? I mean,
Or like talking to people in person?
actually talking to people in person at conferences, it's really, really strange after a couple of years. I mean,
Yeah, and even for data people,
Yeah.
there's a stereotype. A lot of us data people don't like doing it, but this was a very engineering heavy conference. Even a lot of the vendor folks out there had, their sales engineers, their actual engineers out here talking to people, and everybody was having a good time.
That's awesome. What were any highlights?
Anaconda keynote was cool. I think a lot of people would say the same. Hex obviously dropped some big news earlier this week. They had a lot of their hipster swag out there. Very interested in the hipster swag.
What's an example of hipster swag for the audience out there?
Tell us.
Yeah, like Converse type shoes with swag on them, and I'm not a hipster. I'm a jaded New Yorker, which is different. Like, I live in Manhattan, not Brooklyn. But there's some different. I don't know what you call those jackets the hipster people wear. But there were those around too.
We're in Salt Lake, so I don't know if they're hipsters here at all.
I mean, there are, but it's weird, right? It's like one of those weird Western. We're not quite the same.
We're like more like
hipsters.
Walmart hipster.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Matt, your shirt's a little hipstery, more so than Joe.
That's true. I do have kind of a hipster collection of shirts. I think that's accurate. I don't usually wear them during business hours.
Yeah, but my
here we are.
shirt's actually OG hipster. It's American Apparel from like the
Yeah.
OG. Yeah.
And they're not even around anymore.
Exactly.
So that's even like more rare.
That's
more
a flex.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna pass this down to my kids, and they can wear it and also be hipsters and stuff. So well, that's cool. Yeah, we meant to get out to Data Council. We've had this small issue of a book deadline, so we're kind of stuck. But I think Matt's like, yeah, tell me about it. So
No, it's
hopefully
just
next year we'll go, and
Yeah.
it'd be a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
but yeah, on the show, I guess you want to talk about enabling data teams, choosing the right data tools, probably a bunch of other stuff. So what's been on your mind?
Yeah. I mean, one of my things that I've been, kind of hammering home lately and chatting about, noodling through, is the idea of like, I don't know what to call it yet, but there's the concept of data enablement, data team enablement. Noodling around with these, talking to a bunch of different people. Like the whole idea here is like a sales team has sales enablement, and if you go to any enterprise company, they've got director of sales enablement associate or manager. These are all the people and the tools, and what helps salespeople not waste time on silly things, operate more efficiently, close deals quicker, and get more feedback. Like, there's all these kinds of sales tools out there, like Gong and a number of others, Chorus AI and everything, that help give the feedback of how the sausage is getting made on a sales team. And there's analogies too with marketing. There's marketing enablement. I would say DevOps to an extent is even like enablement for like product engineering teams.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like my thing is like, as data teams become costlier, people are getting higher and higher salaries. There's more and more tools, more complexity. We figured out all the basics at this point. Now we're at the point as, data engineers, analysts, data scientists, PMs around data, et cetera. Like, how do we actually work better, right? How do we actually like get things done? And, you both are consultants. You've done this for longer than I have. And, I do this all the time as well. Like, when I come into an environment, like a lot of times the tech can be decent. Like everything that's in place is like, there's a little bit of things to tinker with, but the reason that the sky was falling or that I was brought in is to like figure out how to like put some process in place and how to like, actually figure out like how to, not have things go into like the black hole of the data team. So this is something that, I think all of us have thought about this in different ways in the back of our minds. Anyone who's ever managed a team as like a director, manager, VP of this type of stuff knows about this, thinks about it. But yeah, I think it's time to start like talking more about like data enablement, data team enablement, and how do we get these like highly intelligent, highly well-paid people like working more efficiently.
Yeah, I think there's this broader build versus buy conversation too, which is anyone who tries to hire senior seasoned talent who knows the data and the technology and the processes, like good luck. Especially if you're deploying newer cloud technologies like Snowflake, you're just not going to find these people, or they're not going to be at a price that you're willing to pay. And so there are a lot of data people working in various other domains who maybe have experience on other databases, who have some experience doing data science, but are interested in doing data engineering. But yeah, they have to be skilled up. They need process help to really be able to do things in a corporate environment. I like the term enablement here versus just training. The reputation of training in technology is sometimes not great. The reputation is someone who comes in, does a really dry training, which is really just a collection of quick starts that doesn't tell you anything that you couldn't do on your own online.
That's interesting, but I guess what more could managers be doing right now? So say you run a data team, like what could you be doing right now to enable your team?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is like ticketing and how your ticketing system works. And is your team a ticket team? Or is your team 20% tickets, 80% proactivity? Is your team 50-50? This is something that like I've talked about a number of times with people because when there's someone who's like, managing a team for the first time and just a huge backlog coming in, this can be, ticket answering. And maybe that's what's needed now, or that's needed for a 3-month period or something, but it leads to attrition and it leads to like report churning at the cost sometimes of modeling and of course accumulation of tech debt. So that's one thing, right? Like when I've managed teams before and when I've with my customers hired like directors, managers, people managers of teams, like how one thing I always ask is like right now, like where are we at? Is it 50-50 answering tickets? Is it strategic tickets, or is it, hey, go do this, right? Like what is the ticket like? So that's one of the obvious ones. And that's like, when people get burned out and what we do, like that's often one of the things that causes it. I've had that happen to myself and my teams in my career. I'm not, special. That's something that, in my younger years, I definitely experienced.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, there's a whole new generation of tools too that I think enable stuff like workflow automation and workflow simplicity. We're actually doing this right now at our company for marketing and sales. Just my mandate is anything that can be automated, like figure it out and automate the workflow, and frees you up to work on the value add stuff, right? So if you're an analyst, it'd be stuff like modeling, or or for engineers, it's adding value wherever you can, I suppose, right? But even just little things like that, the amount of time you invest in just simple process improvements can go a long way. Obviously, you need to know where to look, though, because not all processes are created equal, and so that's part of the challenge. I would say, yeah, having dedicated enablement resources would be a great first step, because it's the same question that kind of noodling on with others as well. It's like, why is it? I kind of wrote this yesterday in the newsletter. It's like, why analysts should ask why. So there's no shortage of great tools out there, right? I mean, there's no shortage of data tools. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons. I don't think that's a problem right now. Right? Pretty much any solution you want to solve a data problem, you can. So, I don't think it's a training issue per se for data people, because there's like endless amounts of data science or analytical resources out there right now to learn statistical techniques, how to make better dashboards, how to storytell with data. So why is it that teams don't feel like they're enabled? Like this is why is it that we're still going through a lot of the same motions and broken processes that we've kind of had for a while? It's an interesting question. So
I'm gonna put my analyst hat on here, right? And there's the whole there's the whole concept. Here we go. We're gonna go on a 15-minute tangent and go everywhere here. No, there's the idea of like, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it, right? Like, and so like an example of this, like that I see the best data teams doing, and only a few data teams doing, is measuring and managing throughput. And I don't mean like technical throughput or systems throughput necessarily, but what I mean is, let's say you're an e-commerce store and you're using Shopify, and you've got a little data team. You've got a manager, you got an engineer, you got an analyst, and that's your team. You're using MailChimp for all your emails, and then you decide to switch to Klaviyo, which is pretty popular email platform in the e-commerce space. So you've got all your stuff. Maybe you've got your Fivetran, typical modern data stack or whatever. You got your Fivetran, you got a Snowflake, you've got your reports set up in whatever it is, Mode or Looker or whatever, and everything. Your marketing team is switching, and the switch is happening. And how long does it actually take the data team to build the integration, to put the new platform in place, remodel all the stuff? So instead of using all the attributes that exist from the one system, changing it to the new system, and then changing all the reports in place, and that's like the throughput, right? Like this is a common thing that happens at a small to medium sized company. How long does that take? And I've seen this take anywhere from 2 weeks to the whole world. We're just not going to have email reporting for 3 months, and then there's no tying email activity to revenue or to customer activity that's coming from like the Shopify system. I've seen this is rolled out in pieces. So you do one report, you do 2 reports, and then over 4 or 5 months, things get rolled out differently. And this is all throughput, right? This is like understanding, there was a changing event that happened. It's pretty impactful for the business. The data team was probably not involved in the decision of what new email service provider, ESP, was chosen, but it's going to be actioning on it. And how long does this take to actually make this change? And it varies by org, and most orgs don't measure this at all. But that's throughput of how quickly can you respond and how quickly can you change and deliver on this stuff. And there's a bunch of ways to measure this, right? Like some places will if you're a heavy Jira house and you're using that, you can do the time between tickets, and you can measure how long it took to get from A to B and B to C, and the final delivery and things. And that's a step in the right direction. But this is the kind of thing that on small understaffed teams, it's just not taken into account these days. And I think that's an issue. I mean, What do you both think? Is this something that you've seen? Is this something that like you have opinions about? Curious to hear what both of you have to say about this.
I think it's a really tough problem because I've seen measurements work extremely well, and I've also just seen measurements turn into complete BS. Fundamentally, any work you're not doing repeatedly is very, very hard to estimate. Is kind of my. That's why Joe and I have talked about in the consulting space. Is really, really nice to do repeatable things, because even repeatable things are going to be a little bit different at every company. They're going to be details that you run into, but still, you kind of get an idea of like, okay, this is roughly what it's going to take, and here are some risks that could make it go longer. But like, I've been on teams where, we're measuring velocity, which I think velocity is like,
oh, that's such a loaded term.
Point. And it gets really tricky, right? Because like one week, the manager's like, why is our velocity so terrible? And I'm like, well, why don't we go through the tickets? This one was clearly completely misscoped. So was this one. We can go down and see why the quote unquote velocity was wrong. And like, I don't know. I don't have a solution to that problem. On the other hand,
I do.
About it, but
it's better requirements planning and better requirements gathering, right? Like, asking better questions and so forth. I think that's a job, I would say, of the person who's, either the PM, that could be product project manager, or the data team manager. But I would say if there's a ticket in there, it has to be, I think to your point, Matt, like there are really crappy ways to write tickets. And I think a lot of this just comes down to communication, frankly, or miscommunication. It's not a technology issue. I mean, technology will either like amplify, the good processes you have or the really poor ones you have. But I wouldn't say this is, somebody asked earlier, what are the best teams a data team can use to organize better and to be more productive from Liberato. But I think it's a question to ask. I think you need to take a step back and understand, okay, so like, how are we defining the work that we're doing in the first place? Right? Like, is this the right work we're doing? And are we aligned to do this work? And have we asked the stakeholders the right questions? Do we know what the scope is? Is that scope going to change? Right? So what are the things that, could throw us off? What are the risks? So a lot of it just comes down to, I think, just asking better questions. Again, in the email I wrote yesterday, I was kind of like, I think just asking why is a very important skill that is a bit underrated. Like getting to the root cause of something. Like, what is, at the end of the day, like asking what done looks like. That's the other question I think people fail to ask. So if I were to ask you,
definition of done,
definition of done's huge, right? So when you're talking to stakeholders, when you're talking to the business, anything you do, you should always ask, so when this is done, like, what's supposed to happen? So, because all too often, I think an analyst, or data types especially, we're nerdy, so we want to go off and show off how smart we are by making cool looking reports, and that's a temptation. Engineers want to go engineer stuff, and that's great. That's great. Go and do that as long as you're accomplishing done at the end of the day. So, that's my 2 cents, 5 cents, whatever.
Yeah, I think one of the other things in here that I've been noodling on and thinking through, and I'm curious to hear opinions on this, is like, like what is the order of operations of what a data team like works on and how they get stood up and everything. And to use an example, right? Like phase one, year one. I'll call it year one. Maybe it doesn't take a year. Maybe it takes longer than a year. But you're gonna set up your stack, right? You're gonna have phase one. You're setting up your stack. A warehouse, database, whatever, something to store, collect the information. And that comes with a whole variety of different ways that can look. But sure, let's just say it's like a data warehouse, a BigQuery, or a Teradata, or whatever. I could name 30 different solutions out there, as could both of you. You're going to set up, the integrations in, the ETL, ELT, if you want to call it that, whether it's streaming, whether you do in batch, that's the other piece. And then you're going to set up some kind of reporting layer or something that allows you to action this, report on it. And that's, that's your basic data stack, right? And then, there's the modeling piece in the warehouse, like, independent of how you want to do that, stored procedures versus like a DBT versus a bunch of other things. But that's your year one. That's setting up the data stack. Phase two is how do you make it good? Like, how do you like, you can get something in place and, you can do one of the classic, what's grown popular in the SMB space, mid-market space last couple of years. You can do your 5-trans snowflake looker or whatever. Okay, there's phase one. Now, phase two, like, how do you make sure there's quality, there's, the speed, like things, tickets, whatever, getting through properly, and, everything's like working correctly. Like, how do you make this, there's the idea of good, fast, and cheap, right? You can, there's a joke, right? You can have something good and cheap, but it won't be fast. You can have something good and fast, but it, won't be cheap or whatever. And then you can have something fast and cheap, but it won't be good. But, these three things are that's how you make a system better, or a solution better, or a company better, or whatever. Like, you solve for these. And so if there's costs that are getting out of control, which we've all seen, that's a phase two problem. Like, hey, add your partitions into your BigQuery, or stop leaving Excel Snowflake on all day long. That's the way to solve for cost. Observability, unit testing, tests. That's the way to make things good and make it better. And like alerting, and where do the alerts go? Do they go to the stakeholders? Do they go just to the engineering team? Like, how does that work, right? And then fast is, I guess, my earlier point. Like, how are we making sure that, like, when a request comes in or there's some kind of change or whatever, like, we're getting that through as efficiently as possible? So, like, there's definitely like a way that, like, I would argue that there's definitely like that year one, phase one, like, mindset that anyone who's done this for a few years has, of what that year one, phase one looks like. But what phase two looks like, that's reactionary. Like, if you have major cost problems, you're going to fix cost because your rear end's on the line. If it's quality, the data's always wrong, we don't trust this, blah, 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 then you need to solve for that. And if it's this, it takes 6 months to get anything done with the data team or whatever, that's a different one. And there's not a defined way yet, I think. And I think that's a mistake. I think that as we mature as like an industry and mature as a profession, that figuring out this year two, phase two of how to make this more efficient and, clean out the crud. I think that's how we should start thinking about this more and more, especially like, if you're in a management level or you're a consultant, like we all are. I'll pause there before I ramble on for another 10 minutes on this.
That's fine.
I like this framing.
I like the framing too, but there's a couple of things I would say. Depending, year one, phase one, year one, or whatever, reverse order, year one, phase one, it really depends on, I suppose, the availability of data, and the data maturity of a company. My advice for a lot of companies starting out with nothing is use Excel or Google Sheets. I'm not even kidding. So I'm like, you need to get a handle on like the metrics you're trying to calculate. You need to make decisions. Like, you don't need, to sit there and kind of navel gaze. Like, this is the time you need to just get scrappy. I'm a spreadsheet junkie. I like them. It's kind of like, I don't know.
What did we hear on a call today? The coinage Excelforce.
Yeah, somebody told us about this Excel-based CRM they built called Excelforce. Yeah, I thought that was pretty handy. Yeah. But I think I'm a huge fan of starting low fidelity, and just like getting your processes right. Because if you can't get it right with a low fidelity system, you're probably not going to get it right with a high fidelity one. Right? Like, I've never seen a situation where you buy more expensive tooling and like you're like inefficient processes and your inability to make good decisions suddenly becomes like it's just solved, right? Like, it's usually the opposite, where actually you need probably less tooling more than anything. And so, it's so I'd say, my suggestion is, but this depends. If you're, so a person who just went to a new company to be a data scientist, they have no data. Someday they will. And so I'm like, start small. I don't think you need to be talking, an extravagant tool stack just yet, because you don't even know what you're trying to solve for yet. So, but then let's assume you do have data though, and then you're setting up a stack. And I fully agree. Like, the phase one, your one suggestion is good for most use cases. And then from there, where does it break down? I would say again, it probably breaks down because what we often see is there's a fixation on the tools and the practices at the expense of making sure, like, one, I'm actually figuring out what I'm trying to deliver to stakeholders and then dialing in on that. I would say you need to be like ferociously involved with like end use cases and solving the problem, and then work backwards from that. So if you were to pick like one or two big outcomes you're trying to like that you paid to solve for, I would focus relentlessly on solving those no matter how you do it, and then work back to the solution. And so that's where we see a lot of teams, fail. I mean, if you're solving, pretty gnarly problems, I mean, I think even things like data pipeline problems will, those breaking are forgivable. Like, you definitely put those observability in after. But if you're just basically like supplying, buckets of turds to the business, and they're just going to like, thanks for my bucket of turds, that's great, I will see you tomorrow when I get another bucket of these. That's not great. So,
well, if you have good visualization, you can make those turds look prettier, which
true.
Earlier points in my career, I did that I had some great Tableau. What is they called? Iron Chef, Iron Viz. I had some Iron Viz style stuff going on, but behind it all was out of my control and smoke and mirrors.
But I think your framing, Lauren, underscores a key thing, and that is that with data, we so often talk in terms of initiatives, especially people in our business come in to help with an initiative. And like time boxing is great. The problem with initiatives is that they're often a 1 year period. And so it's like, okay, our initiative for this year is to migrate from on-prem data warehouse to Snowflake, say, or whatever cloud data warehouse. Big migration. All right, all hands on deck. Bring in a bunch of consultants. Bring in Accenture, whomever, and do all this work. Do the migrations. The data's there, but then after that, the ball gets dropped. Year 2 doesn't really happen, and then people wonder, well, like, okay, we spent all this money on Snowflake or whatever tool, but the data is still kind of terrible. We're not seeing a lot of value out of this. And in the product space, the framing is completely different. Like no product startup says, okay, this year our initiative is just to create our product and then we'll be done and everything will be awesome. I mean, the assumption is, all right, we're going to be working on our product this year and the next year, and it's going to be a huge long road to make it better over time. And that's the year 2 and year 3 and year 4 stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, I think we still want to have these big initiatives with the understanding, though, that that's just the launch stage. And then you've got to have all the process control to continually improve both your processes and delivery and business value. That was 3 things, not 2. But anyway.
Retract your statement, Matt. Jeez.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm noticing too. Not even to get into specific tools, but more concepts is like the idea of like the data catalog, which the word data catalog can send shutters down some spines and scare some people, but that's been moving down market. And the premise of that, and there's a couple different vendors out there doing this, and there's open source solutions as well that are free. But the idea is that like by better managing lineage and better having documentation, like this is what's important, because historically, like the idea of a data catalog is you think, okay, data catalog, there's Informatica solutions, there's Calibra, there's Elation, and they're all like the idea of data governance is something that only enterprise companies ever really did, and it's because of regulatory reasons and just the complexity of large businesses. But this is moving down market now, and there's other solutions out there that are have popped up in the last 2 years, and they wouldn't exist if there weren't demand for it. So like I've been wondering about all this and looking where this space is going, because the premise is correct. Like, yeah, when you hire a new person, how long does it take for that person to be able to like write an effective query, or to submit a PR, or whatever measure of success is defined as, depending on that person's role? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Do they have to like do a whole metadata exercise and figure out what's where, and they have to do archaeology themselves. Or paleontology sometimes, like archaeology versus sometimes it's paleontology if it's a really old system and no
yeah,
one's
that's
been
a
on
good way
it
of putting it. We've
DB2 from like the 1980s or something.
I'm sure it goes
no,
older than that too. That's only that's when the dinosaurs got. There's older. So, yeah.
like I think not to get into any like specific vendor here, but I think that's that's really interesting to me, because the fact that like this is being attacked multiple ways tells me that like, and I've lived it myself, of course, like this is a problem and it's not solved yet.
Oh, I remember even 6-7 years ago, I was looking for data catalog tools, and what there's just like an open source. You could go with the big vendors at that point and spend money you probably don't have on stuff you probably don't need. You could go. I think there were a few open source projects, but they looked more abandoned than used, and so I was like, I don't know what this is. And so then you basically turn to a trusty old Google Docs or Confluence for your catalogs. It's like, well, that's kind of all I got, or a spreadsheet. So, but what I find really interesting about this is you're right. It's cataloging is huge now. I see some of these vendors, kind of referring to themselves more as like a CRM for data and stuff, which I think is an interesting twist, and it's kind of a cool take. And so, what I find fascinating is these weren't discussions that are happening even a couple of years ago, right? Like maybe these products were under development, and maybe at some big companies that are being done for, as you say, kind of down market, SMB, small medium business. Certainly not. These were not talked about. I still think they're probably not talked as much about at these smaller companies, but that's because there's just a lot of them, and we probably aren't hearing all the conversations. For one, but these companies are definitely these newer batch of catalog and other, I would call, enterprisey startups, data startups. They're focusing in down market, which I think is pretty awesome, actually. So what it means is that and Matt and I write about this, where we think with the continued abstraction and data engineering tools, the role is going to change a lot, not just for data engineers, but for everybody who touches data. It's going to move more towards stewardship, asset management, things that, in my opinion, actually add more value than making another chart or fixing another broken pipeline, that kind of stuff. I think making charts is good, but I suppose the nature of the supporting it and quote enabling infrastructure is certainly changing right now. So, Matt, Dr. Housley, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think the other big theme I've seen with catalogs and lineage is that these tools existed in the enterprise space, and the old philosophy of data management was that it was very command and control. So you would have these different organizations that would participate, but they'd go to some kind of committee and they decide together, okay, how's this data going to work and what are the specifications?
They all like wear robes and stuff,
and probably wear robes.
Yeah, like around like.
Yeah, well, you gotta go to the Ways and Means Committee to decide if you're even going to talk about it. And 2 months later, you get around to it.
Yeah, and then there's the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, sends you back a report on how much it's going to cost to like manage this new data source. And I think the approach we've seen to data cataloging and lineage, and even I'll call it the data social layer at places like Netflix, is that these are actually tools for decentralization. So in other words, Netflix, I don't know if they still have this, but they used to have like their data portal. They had a blog post about it where you would have it's like a wiki of all these different data sources that's also connected into cataloging lineage tools. And so anyone in the company can see, oh, here's this data that exists over here. That looks interesting based on what it is, what the description is. I might want access to that. You can request access, send a message or put in a ticket and get access. And I think this new generation of cataloging and lineage tools kind of follows that model. And so I think if we use them appropriately, they can help to actually improve data decentralization and collaboration across the whole organization. That's what scares people as soon as you mention data catalog, because they think of these central committees like controlling everything.
Well, you just created a bunch of new work for people.
And things don't get done, right?
Yeah,
if everyone has to get together every Tuesday for the data management meeting, like during the rest of the week, stuff is just not getting done, and it takes a long time to make decisions. There's a lot of blathering about how things are going to work, whereas if it's just tickets and you have visibility across the organization, it can be much more streamlined.
Actually, we got a couple of questions here, relevant questions. choosing data tools is related. So DevOps, what's up? Always has good questions. When choosing right data tools, is it a decision that can change quickly based on how the wind blows? Is predicting hard? What would be our 2 to 3 key factors when considering a new data tool?
Yeah, I'll take an initial stab at this. So I think that when you're looking at, tools, you should have a solution and what you're trying the solution for, and this is solving it. Like, I think all three of us on this call are people who like to noodle around and play with things and know a lot of the people making these different solutions, open source, paid, whatever. But key factors here, right? One is how early the company is. And when a company is earlier and you're solving and like you're as valuable to them as they are to you when a company is early. And like people don't talk about that much, but like when you're at a company that's been around for let's say 2 years and they've got some traction, your buddy over somewhere used them and recommended them to you, like, even if you're not in like a design partner phase, like you're still like, you know, you're still like very much partnered with like where the roadmap of that company can go, even if you're a smaller business. And the feedback's usually very much appreciated. And so this is all to say that like when you're choosing a tool, like and you're choosing something that's been around for years and you've talked to 4 different salespeople during the process, but like, there's all these great Gartner reports about how this is the best thing ever because they're so big. Like, yeah, sure, that's, nobody ever got fired for IBM or whatever, hiring IBM or hiring McKinsey, right? That's what the saying goes. And so, when you choose a tool like, that's bigger, like you kind of know what you're going to get because it's been so established. But when you look at these earlier ones that are smaller, like I always go in and like, until I'm told no, act like the design partner and see what I can push for the product. And, in a trial POC type period or a freemium version, do whatever I can to like find the gotchas because I should be, if I'm recommending a tool or implementing it somewhere, I need to know what I'm on the hook for. And, figuring out like how to partner with this company, especially some of these like smaller, earlier ones. I think the other factor here, like another key factor, since you asked for 2 or 3, would be, obviously there's TCO associated with anything, and total cost of ownership, right? Like what is it actually going to cost in human hours, in rolling this out? You know, if you buy X to solve Y, is that going to be 10 hours of your week every week? Is it going to be 50 hours upfront for, you and the analyst who reports to you, but then it's kind of smooth sailing? And, having that lens on it, like a lot of first time managers and then people who are earlier in their career, like that can be the gotcha. Especially as a lot of these tools are like becoming cheaper and more PLG focused and easier to implement. But that's something to always think about, like what the actual human cost is going to be.
For sure. I mean, Matt and I, we have this concept of total opportunity cost of ownership too, which is, so yeah, that's 10 hours or 50 hours or whatever. So what am I not doing as a result of this now, right? That's a huge thing. So we definitely recommend, a big factor is if it's not a core competency, then you probably don't need to build it. It's not that special to you. So I'll give you an example, data integrations right now, right? Connecting data from point A to B. That is a very solved problem by probably a bajillion companies at this point, all with different costing models. You can even get the open source versions, but connectors are connectors. That's solved. Unless you have a very good reason to build one. Don't build like a MySQL to Snowflake connector, for example. That's just idiotic in this day and age. Like, we can't be friends if you do that. So, on the other hand, though, if it's something that is a competitive advantage, I would say that's where you need to look really hard at these vendors and say, okay, so, well, how far would this get me if I purchase this? And when's my exit? Because if it is a competitive advantage, by definition, it's something you do special, which means nobody else is really doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one lens that we definitely urge people to look for. And then it's kind of build versus buy, and which is along with that. And then what else? Modularity is a big one, which you hit on as well, where especially with just dozens and dozens of tools per vertical, it's like, how committed do you want to be to a company? And if you had to leave, what does that exit look like? So we had a vendor once that was a startup. We relied on them for certain functionalities. Won't get too many details, but that startup went out of business. And they're like, here's our open source code if you'd like to use that. I'm like, that's not why we use your service. So I could have just written this myself. So we ended up having to switch, and that email came, and then I think it was maybe a week or two later that switch had to happen. It was just that quick. So great customer support. But I've definitely looked for those kind of things. Like, what's the exit plan? If you do get in with something early, or if you get in with something established, like always have a an exit door. It's sort of when I teach my kids to climb. I always tell them, okay, so if you're without a rope, like figure out how you first need to figure out how you're going to get down. Don't figure out how you're going to get up. So if you're lucky enough to get up, you still have to get down. So what do you think, Matt?
I'm actually going to ask kind of a follow-on question here rather than commenting too much on that. So if you Lauren, did you follow the whole Twitter massive kerfuffle about Bundlegate and unbundling versus bundling of tools? There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, we didn't do a show on this at all. No.
No, we is this horse beaten into the ground already, or do we want to beat it more?
No, this is like horse paleontology at this point. We're
it's paleontology, right.
Yeah. So I think more my comment is like, how do you decide between more consolidated tools versus more fractured tools, which I think that's a big issue right now. There's such a proliferation of different tools. Are there platforms that are better in terms of providing unified functionality so that you don't have to bring in so many tools in your stack?
Yeah. And this is something that, like, I my cop out is it depends. But like, two examples would be like, a Nexla or a Kabula, which like do integrations, do the reverse ETL, can do some observability type stuff in there, and have, wide libraries of integrations, actually wider than some of the, ELT type tools that people would know, or come to, top of mind first. And these kind of do everything. And the ones that are more specialized, and do, I don't want to say one thing, but do a specific, small feature set of things. You got to pick 3 or 4 of these to all work together, and it's very much a generational thing. Like, I can put on my tinfoil hat here and tell you that, like, with the way, capital's moved through the markets in the last couple of years, there's incentives to make companies that focus on one thing, and they can get cash quicker than they could in the past, and blah, blah, blah. And that's, maybe a part of why we're seeing this. But most of the older folks out there that I've worked with, like, I'm not going to call you two older folks, although you both are older than me.
We're literally older than
like people who've, used Informatica before, and, have used Talon before, and, they're used to consolidated things, and they look at this and they scratch their head and they say, why on earth are there 8 or 9 different things that I'm going to need to buy and deal with 8 to 9 different sales processes and 8 to 9 different account managers or CS managers, or whoever's, helping me out as I roll this out. And if I have a problem, who do I go to? And I think when people say bundled versus unbundled, it's like very generational. Like, it's very millennial, Gen Z type of stuff out there. And I actually, like, at a lot of the larger enterprises and such, like, there's people who aren't going to buy anything unless Gartner told them to. Or, unless, not Gartner told them to, but, they're on a certain report of Forrester or Gartner or something. And that's, they're going to buy these deeper solutions that do multiple things just because it's more tried and true. And, there's more CYA involved and things like that. So I see this whole idea of unbundled and, more point solution-y type stuff as sign of the era, and I don't actually think it's going to last without getting too much into like finance and everything, like I don't think it's going to last much longer. But you know, if you put this on YouTube and we look at it in 3 years, maybe I'll be, you know, eating my shoe. Who knows?
I mean, if
we'll probably video that on YouTube too.
Yeah.
Quote me right on it, right?
We'll let
when I
you
run
boil
for
it first.
when I run for Congress one day, this will
I'll
be
eat my own shoe if this doesn't
right.
happen.
Read my lips.
No new single product vendors. Read my lips.
I mean, I think fundamentally, though, the situation right now at least seems unstable and not tenable in the long term. I don't know if I can predict. I can't predict how that's going to change, but something is going to change in the near future, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good prediction, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Make it super vague.
Something will happen in the future. And Lauren, it's like eat her shoe. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I just listened to the DBT podcast on this today, and it's the bundling, unbundling. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's this has just been the constant cycle in technology from day one, though. It's kind of like, you know, consolidation, then everything shatters and so forth. And it's just the pendulum. That's how it is. And so, I don't know where it goes. I'm excited either way. I do think that there'll be going to be fewer vendors in the field at some point, just because it's just pure economics. But could be wrong on that too. I don't know. I've been wrong about a lot of stuff. So, but I think it's good for the consumer in some ways. It's also terrible in a lot of other ways because you have too many choices. So I'm much more of a fan of like the of pretty simple menus. Matt always knows I like to talk about menus at restaurants. But like In-N-Out Burger. It's like, what do we sell? Oh, burgers and fries. Great, I'll take that. Not like a Cheesecake Factory menu where it's just here's 5,000 things, and which one of these would you like, or which 12? So, but I think, Lauren, the interesting thing that you bring up, is of the buying process is painful right now.
And it's gotten worse, right? The old cloud buying process was that I would go into the console, I would sign up, I would put in a credit card, and I would just pay. And if I had to do that with 5 tools, fine, not a big deal. But if I have to interact with a salesperson, if on there it says, if you want the enterprise plan, you have to call someone, that starts to get really painful.
Right. And that's usually like I run the other way when I see that on a page, unless there's a good reason, unless I like the product. But how would I know I like the product if I haven't tried it? So,
Yeah. And, you mentioned earlier opportunity costs. Like, how many bake-offs can you run in a year of A versus B of this thing and A versus B of that thing? Like, that's
That's what the data enablement manager should do, is just be in charge of the bake-offs and vendor negotiations.
That's why you hire Upright Analytics or Ternary Data to give you the inside scoop on everything.
We can shorten your path to success. Your time is valuable. But in all seriousness, it's it's a delicate process for people like us, right? Because we get paid to suggest technologies, but in a lot of cases, you have to balance this against the team, the data team and the company you're working with, because in a lot of cases these are friends or people who trust you, and this is you need to be very careful with the types of vendors you'd bring in, to be perfectly frank, because like some if they're going to be respectful of the relationship, great. I've seen things go very sideways, and I have to later apologize to my friends at these companies, and like, that shouldn't have happened. I'm very sorry. And so, but that doesn't really reflect well on that product, for example. So, but the other thing is, I would say that, ask maybe some other things you can do. Just ask around. If you work at a company, ask maybe other departments at your company, ask your friends in the industry, show up to data council, where all the people will try and pitch you on their products. But I think, in all seriousness, get different opinions. So the data world's incredibly small.
The data world is so incredibly small, and this is my one of my jaded things about this, that there's maybe 2,000 people around the data world who know what they're doing and move stuff around, and
including us, of course.
Yeah, there's just 3 of them right here.
That's right.
No, I mean, it's like, who know multiple technologies, because there's specialists who are just like that person, who are very, very deep on that one thing, right, and have really good careers doing that.
Sure.
But of the people who like, know like very much like, hey, how do you like roll out DBT at an enterprise data environment? Like, because so much of the stuff is so new, it's a growing number, but it's still a very small number for a lot of the stuff.
Just knowing about the snafus, right? Like seeing, a bunch of different Snowflake migrations and saying basically, yeah, Snowflake is awesome, but here are some typical snafus that people run into. These are things that people do wrong with this tool. And here are some things that this new tool can't do. It's awesome for X, Y, and Z. It's terrible for this other application over here.
Well, even a big thing I noticed too is just the tools that the clouds themselves sell, and just how much I would say the experience is pretty mixed with some people, right? We still see people bolting together some crazy stuff using nothing but the homegrown products. When AWS, you see some, I would say, pretty interesting workflows, and it gets the job done. It could get the job done better, sure, but so part of that I think it's an education thing. Maybe the clouds explicitly do tell you though, like we suggest you do it this way, and so part of our work too is just coming in and advising companies, and okay, so here's maybe the probably more optimal way to do this in say AWS, GCP, but it still surprises me how often this happens, because like we've been talking about all the I'm guessing third-party vendors, but this doesn't include like kind of the standard out of the box solutions you can stitch together on the cloud. So
and that's just it. I mean, the big advantage to the discussion earlier is that now you only have one vendor, even if the tools are awkward. It's just one neck to choke. You don't have to deal with like 20 different vendors or 5 different vendors or whatever. And I guess in the long term, that probably is the play for a lot of these companies, right? We've seen an acquisition spree, startups getting picked up by big cloud vendors and such. And that's probably what a lot of the small data vendors are hoping to do, to become part of someone's stack, just default option in AWS, GCP, whatever.
Yeah, no, there's definitely the market, especially, people talk about PLG and things like that, utility pricing models, like, versus a, whatever per month, like SaaS typical standard contract. Like, if you look at Salesforce and the way Salesforce works, and like the Salesforce, like, the tools that go along with Salesforce, or in the e-commerce world, the stuff that goes along with like Shopify, like, it's a marketplace model, and we're only just starting that right now in the data world.
Yeah.
It's been going on for a while, but it's still pretty nascent. Because if you run an e-commerce store and you've got your Shopify, you can, you want to put stars and reviews. There's like 10 different options that you can pick in the marketplace and test them out, and do different things there. Or you want to do emails, you want to do refer a friends, like that's pretty well established, like in that marketplace. And same with any of these ecosystem type things.
Well, you got
like
Amazon, you got Magento, and any numbers, right? So and then it kind of makes you wonder what happens with open source too, in this regard, because it's sort of it's the glue that holds everything together, in a lot of ways, but it's also so there's definitely some vendors that obviously do commercial open source and have their regular open source and so forth. But that's a pretty big question too. Like, I guess it's about incentives. And so, if you're making a marketplace offering, like what does that look like? Do you kind of go back to the old shareware model, or I don't know. I mean, because look at App Store, for example, and I can get like I buy all kinds of like music apps on my phone and download a ton, but I usually get like the free ones to try them out first. Like my phone's like loaded with synthesizers and crazy stuff, so I just get really bored easy. So, but I'm just wondering what do you think happens to open source at this point? Like, curious.
Open source isn't going to go away. I mean, open source is one of the best ways for everybody to, one, people to learn things, 2, people to contribute to things, and like. One of the best and worst things I think about open source and the way these communities are made today, and they contribute to this, is that it allows people who are outside of, the privilege of living in like the US, or living in a country that like, where there's like infrastructure and goods, a lot of, opportunities and stuff. And I've seen and know of people who, come from just places that are just all over the world, who are contributing to these open source projects. And are, that's what like makes their career, or that's what like gets them in front of the right people, right? It's like very much opportunity building there. I think that the whole open source model of like, I don't want to get, you and I have talked about this a lot, Joe, in the past. I don't want to get into certain vendors here, but there's pluses and minuses of staying fully open source. Like, a lot of enterprises actually will not buy certain open source solutions just because of regulatory reasons and whatever else. And they want to be able to point a finger if something goes wrong. There's a CYA involved, and the less open source a purchased solution is, the more reassured they are, and the more like they're able to get something through procurements and roll something out. And so there's like a commercial aspect as well to like, not relying on open source. And what was the recent? There's like a big breach with what was the one a couple weeks ago?
Which one?
Well, there you go. There you go.
I mean, there was one. What
we're
was
not
it?
talking about
NVIDIA.
Okta,
There was
presume, 'cause that
NVIDIA.
was just announced, but
Yeah,
It
NVIDIA.
was
Then like
NVIDIA.
Lapsus. I think they just like unleashed like a lot of Microsoft code. So I don't know.
yeah.
There's a lot.
There's been a few of these, right? And like, I don't know. I think that I don't know. This is all a rambly circular.
Well, it's Friday. It's TJ. Yeah, so it's a rambling session.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, it's I got 2 more hours until 5, so I got to keep it together for 2 more hours.
It's 4:00 in New York. I mean, you're almost there, right? So.
Well, I'm in Austin, so
I know.
it's only 30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Well,
5 o'clock.
if I have Italian wine in Italy, it's already like 8 p.m. So
Good.
it's,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, it's funny on open source. Even there's this new issue, kind of semi-new issue of hacktivism, and that is where there have been examples of people putting in like malicious commits to attack Russia, which from a political standpoint may be fine, but it's not great for the open source community. That's for certain. So people are worried about getting hacked by commits that people put in. And of course, you probably shouldn't be running like the latest version of that open source code without checking it, but that's just me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, cool. Yeah, hopefully we answered some questions here, or we confuse people more. I don't know. Audience, let us know what you think. So, yeah, but fun chat. So, for people who want to learn more about you, how would they do that?
Yeah, go on LinkedIn. I'm known for my spicy takes on things. I don't think they're spicy. I think they're just. I think we live in an echo chamber world. To the point of what we were talking about earlier, that like everyone in data world knows each other, right? So yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Just reach out, say hi. Upright Analytics is my company. Just like you guys, run a very small shop,
but a very good one,
and a very good one.
Yeah.
I don't think we've collaborated together on any implementation before. So you're getting ahead of yourself there, Joe. You have no idea.
Let's make it happen.
We're actually quite crap.
We'll do it over Italian wine. Start collaborating.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm around. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, it's always it's always interesting. I think chatting with other consultants too, because we just get to see a lot of things. I would say that if you work at a company, for example, right, like you're going to be focusing on whatever your company's doing, and that's what you get paid to do, probably for a long time, which means you're going to be missing out on quite a bit of things. But we get to see some cool stuff, some crazy stuff, meet a lot of interesting people along the way. So it's no shortage of fun. So.
Oh, it's the most fun I've ever had. The best decision of my career was to a little over 2 years ago to start my own thing and start taking up, what kind of work I could get, and then growing from there. Best decision I've ever made. And I talk with people who are younger as well, who, hey, how do I get into consulting, and how do I do this? This looks cool, and I heard you can make a lot of good money doing this. And yeah, the answer is yes to all of it. And you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to have a chat about any of it.
That's pretty cool. You're open about that too. I think giving career, because I think some consultants would find that to be threatening. Like, why are you getting up in my business? Like, stay away, kids.
It's not necessarily a zero-sum game, right? I think that, to be frank, very old traditional consulting shops like Accenture, it kind of is. It's always about a land grab, but it seems like in this smaller, more boutique space, there's space for a lot of different types of consultants doing different things.
Well, I mean, how many companies are there in America?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think we're going to get to all of them? Like, even collectively? Probably not. No. So, and the thing is, it's, yeah, maybe we should do a show sometime on how to get into consulting.
How to avoid multi-round
Maybe.
tech interviews. I was texting with one of my friends last night about interviewing with various data companies and how horrible it is to go through like 5 rounds of interviews and be basically humiliated by technical questions.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Cool. Yeah. Well, on that note, Matt,
Exactly.
Lauren, have fun in Austin. Chat soon. And next Monday morning data chat, Matt and I are going to actually be doing a solo session, no guests. We're going to be talking about the live data stack. So it's something we've been thinking a lot about. Probably be rambling a lot about it on the show, but what comes after the modern data stack?
The postmodern data stack.
The postmodern data stack, of course. So
yeah, it's very David Lynch, type of data stack.
Actually, got a question here. One final question. Is there a podcast related to how to get into consulting?
Yeah, there are a few of them, aren't there?
I don't know if how to get into it, but I would say Ditching Hourly by Jonathan Stark is actually a really good podcast.
And all of Alan Weiss's books, right?
Yeah, Alan Weiss, W-E-I-S-S, kind of like my name, but with a W and one extra S. So he has more consonants than I do. Those are good. But yeah, I'm sure if you look on Spotify or something, you can find any podcast related that you want. But yeah, shoot out a message. Also, I got some other ideas. So Alan Weiss's books are good. He's kind of an interesting guy. He talks about how he likes to take limos everywhere. So
there's a
guy.
Yeah, one of his lessons was like, don't look at what your neighbor has, because someone always has a bigger boat. And then he starts talking about how big his boat is. It's pretty big, but there's someone with a bigger boat, so you can't get jealous.
He does contradict himself sometimes, but he has good advice too.
He's got good advice.
Yeah.
His books do pay for themselves.
Yes.
So awesome. Cool. Well, thanks to
care.
the audience. Yeah, have a great weekend. See you over.